What's going on, guys? Welcome to the newest episode of All Things Locks. Now, today I want to actually touch on something that's been very prevalent, but I do feel that's getting more and more attention. Whether you're on LinkedIn or you're on Twitter or X as it's called, and you're seeing some people commenting about this topic, but has to do with not only are clinicians quitting the U.S. healthcare system, but it's really the big issue that's popping up nowadays is the short amount of time that new grads are actually staying in their field. And it's really rampant. It's not just medical doctors. You're seeing it, nurses, physical therapists, particularly, people who are coming out of school in their 20s and then within, 3 to 5, maybe 7 years max, they're leaving and they're going into either business consulting or healthcare tech, or they're going into, DME supplies. So today I want to talk about not just why this is happening, because it's very easy. We know a lot of the reasons why people are getting driven out of healthcare, but more importantly, for the people that are running practices, we're going to go over some ways you can actually keep people long term, and not just keep them long term, but keep them motivated long term. So I want to get it started. I want to talk about some stats first, right? Definitely when we hear the aspect of medical doctors, physical therapists, and nurses leaving within 5 to 7 years, that's obviously very concerning. And on the medical doctor side of it, you also have this aspect of people who are aging out, or they're getting to retirement age, or, maybe they're just old enough that they say, hey, the grand scheme of where healthcare is headed, I'm going to be looking to leave in the next few years. And that's really, we've talked about it a number of times on this show of about 130,000 physicians are getting ready to leave the U.S. healthcare system in the next 4 years. So then you're looking to the next crop of doctors to take over. So if they're then leaving within the next 5 years, who the hell is replacing those 130,000 doctors? And when we think about patient care, I'll give you a good example. Like my mom, she was just actually talking to me about this, of her own experience trying to make an appointment and they get seen by the doctor. Patients don't understand, and they don't see that, the back end. They don't know that there's a critical shortage going on. So what's going to happen in 4 or 5 years? When instead of waiting 4 weeks for an appointment, patients are waiting 6 to 8 weeks. We think, waiting in the doctor's office for an hour is bad now, and getting 6 minutes of visit time is bad now. What's going to happen then? But now we're also seeing it again in physical therapists, which is they're coming out, they're, looking to maybe build their own practice, or, just obviously practice for the next 25, 30 years. And they're saying within 5 years, this isn't what I anticipated this to be at all. There's got to be other options. So we're really facing some critical juncture here. And it's very easy just to point out problems. We know what's going on with reimbursements, documentation, just insurance as a whole, metrics related to how many patients you're seeing. I get all of that. But the real question is, all right, what the hell can actually change? And I'm not talking about thinking about the government or thinking about Medicare, because the Lord knows those things never change. If anything, they just get worse. So if you're looking at running your own business, or maybe you're leading a team and you're trying to figure out, how do I get more providers to stay long term, more doctors, more physical therapists, or more nurses, how do I get them to stay? And then not just stay and be, what is it called, quiet quitting or a little disengaged. How do I get them to stay and actually be very motivated to want them to do their job at a very high level? So I want to start with just maybe going over some statistics first, because I really do think this is actually pretty damn crazy. When we look at doctors, right, we basically said that about 130,000 of them are leaving by the year 2030. Over 90% of doctors view the administrative burden as the number one reason that they're leaving, right? And if you think about how that impacts patient care, pretty damn high. And physical therapists, their number one gripe is that they have metrics, performance metric. How many patients are they seeing? How much are they billing out? It's really become a numbers game, a game of KPIs. And I'm not saying you're running business without understanding the metrics behind it, but it shouldn't be your number one focus. Last time I checked, you open a medical practice to actually help patients and get an outcome. It's not to just be a number cruncher. But as you see more practices bought out by people in business, private equity, their major focus is, how do I make the biggest profit? You do that by obviously trying to squeeze out as much as you possibly can of your employees. And then when we look at, nurses, 43% want to leave. And I think it's about 40% of them have even said they're only staying in because it provides some kind of financial benefit. They don't really see an alternative. So if you think about it, you have a lot of people who are leaving, and then you have a good amount of people who are staying but also want to leave. So when you think about, all right, how many of our, clinicians are actually motivated to want to do a high level job? It's getting less and less. And this is what patients are noting too. They don't want to listen to me. They get upset if I, or angry if I ask them any questions. There's just no hospitality, so to speak, to the healthcare industry. And I get it. If you're rushed and you're overworked, it's kind of hard to be, very hospitable. I mean, even nurses, they're supposed to see about, a 2-to-1 patient ratio. They're seeing 4 patients. It's ridiculous. And then the people who suffer are the patients. So when we look at, really understanding the root, right? We know that you go to medical school and everybody has the same mentality, which is I want to help patients. So whether you're a nurse, a chiropractor, physical therapist, acupuncturist, most people are not going into the industry to say, I'm just here to make a boatload of money. Most people, majority, are saying, I'm here to actually help patients get better and get an outcome. And then what happens is, they go to school and they get that messaging over and over again. Then they graduate and then reality sets in. Because then very quickly you start to see, you know what, this isn't actually what I signed up for. This is really more about numbers. Where nobody talked to me about how to be prepared for burnout. Or, I was teaching a class of OTs not long ago, and I asked them the same question. And this is a doctor level occupational therapist. And I said, all right, what do you guys, know about burnout? And most of them just gave me blank stares. And then somebody's like, well, we've heard that it's an issue. Heard that it's an issue. It's one of the biggest issues that they're going to face, and nobody's adequately preparing for them, right? So it's not a matter of scaring the hell out of people, thinking the world's ending, but you also can't just have your head in the sand and ignore what is the reality. And this is actually part of the biggest problem, is that we're not properly educating students on, all right, here's the realities. It's not bad. You're doing a lot of good. You're helping a lot of people, but this is just the realities of what you're going to be potentially dealing with. So why don't we start working on getting ahead of it and being prepared? So then they enter the workforce. Then they get proverbially kicked in the nuts, and it says, holy shit, I wasn't prepared for this. This is too much. I don't think I can do this for the next 25 or 30 years, and the days of the older generation, God love my mom, because she has the same mentality. But it's, you work 40 years and then you retire and enjoy yourself. People are like, I can't see myself doing this forget about 25 years. I can't see myself doing this for the next 5 years, barely. So that's one aspect. And then, when we look at the cost of college nowadays, obviously it's ridiculous. So students are coming out massive amount of debt. We're familiar with doctors having a lot of debt, over $200,000, $300,000. Some people, I don't know how they deal with this, but over $400,000 of debt. But then what we're seeing now is that even, nursing programs and physical therapy, PT schools particularly, those costs have skyrocketed. I mean, yes, I went to school, 20 years ago. So things have gotten a lot more expensive. But I remember going to a highly rated university, UMD&J, which is now Rutgers, shout out. And, I think my parents we paid maybe 10 grand a year. It's not dirt cheap, but it's really not that bad. Now you have programs where it's $40,000, $50,000 a year. So students are coming out. I mean, there's some schools you're basically graduating a DPT program and you're having over $200,000 of debt. Now you might say, well, it's not a big deal because they make a lot of money. All right, number one, even doctors, they're not all killing it. So this mentality that everybody's, striking it rich, physical therapists, average starting salary it's not terrible. It's not hard. It's 90 grand, 95,000. You say, well, damn, what the hell are you talking about? Not terrible. That's really damn good. But again, you have that amount of debt. You're not getting 90,000 or 95,000 every year. You got to pay your taxes, and then you got to live a life. You got to, I'm not talking about getting $10 coffees every day, but there is stuff you need to actually pay for, normal bills. So how long does it take you to pay that debt off? We know what that system's like in the U.S. It's completely stacked against you. And then once you enter your profession, it's not just a matter of having to see a boatload of patients, but if you talk to different industries, to speak to doctors, they're going to say, boy, oh boy, the documentation is terrible. The amount of time I have to spend on the phone with insurance, it's taken me away from patient time, right? Or if you talk to a nurse and I mentioned the patient ratio, they're going to say, dude, I have too many patients. I need more help. We had a guest on, Dr. Julie Seamers. I can't remember what episode it was. I'll drop it in the show notes. But, she was talking about hospitals allocating about 15% of their budgets to mistakes, more or less, instead of allocating some of that 15% for staff to hire support staff. So they look at it saying, well, we're going to save money by not having too many employees, whatever the hell that means. But then we understand that there's going to be mistakes as a result, so let's set aside 15% of our budget for that. Like, how does that make any damn sense? Hire the right amount of staff. I'm not saying overhire and have people just staring at their phones all day and not doing a damn thing, but it's hire the right amount of staff so that way your employees could actually be more productive. You get more out of them, which, wow, imagine that. It actually trickles down to giving better patient care and better outcomes. So that's where it's just, some of the thought process of people running these organizations, departments, doesn't really make sense. And again, I mentioned at the beginning, if you're a physical therapist, you're looking at just saying, all right, I have a lot of patients too. Maybe it's me being predicated on delivering a lot of billable units. I have to see a certain amount. And again, I'm all for being productive, but you also know people's limits. And then on top of that, and speaking as a physical therapist here, this is the number one thing we all hated, particularly me, documentation. It's a necessity, right? You have to obviously document what you did, but it takes longer than ever. If you're maybe out of network with insurance, your documentation has to be crazy because they're going to be looking through with a fine-tooth comb. And then, all right, well, you didn't put a period at the end of the sentence, so that claim got denied, so you got to go back in, change the note, update the note. So those are the things, again, it's taking away from patient care. And it's just becoming a rat race, basically, which is why you see also more people going into either cash pay practices, or they're just doing their thing one-on-one, maybe being a traveling clinician. So there's the realities of being in healthcare, of what it's like or what you're getting taught versus what the reality is. So that's a big shift, right? If you're unprepared for something, think about this. It would be, I guarantee we'll have had this happen, but it would be, you see a box on the floor and you think it's heavy as all hell, right? You put in max effort, and then what happens? You pick it up, it's like, whoa! Like, you almost fall backwards because of how light it was. But then you do the opposite. You look at something, you say, that's probably pretty light. And you put no effort into it. And then you end up hurting your back because you end up basically giving a violent jerking motion with your back, and then basically you blow out a disc. So being prepared goes a long way. And when we have expectations of how something's going to play out, if it deviates from that and we're caught off guard, that's what's going to change the perception a lot. So that's why we could definitely start. But since you guys aren't the school administrators, and you're not prepping college students, you're getting them. The question is, all right, how do I maybe prep them differently, or what can I create within my own organization to really know what's going to keep people motivated? Because that's also a big question I'm getting right now, is how do we motivate these people? A lot of younger professionals, especially, they don't want to be in a management position, right? And that's definitely feedback I've gotten. They just want to come in, clock in, clock out. They don't want to be a director. And the frustration with that, obviously, is they've seen the track record of people who get promoted is, I work more and I get paid basically the same. When you factor in how many more hours or responsibilities I'm undertaking compared to my salary increase, it's not worth it. I have no life. It's a lot of stress. So and it makes sense, right? If that was you, I always say, people used to ask me, back in the day when I was treating, and I worked for a phenomenal company, and the owner was ridiculously generous with me. And I made more money as a director than I ever thought I would. But my own family would be, hey, why don't you you're really good, why don't you open up your own practice? And the answer was always the same. I don't have the responsibilities that he does. Once I go home at the end of the night, I still obviously worry about what's going on, but I'm not worried about paying bills, paying providers. That's not my concern. My concern is just to go in there, build a team, help build the organization, and build myself as a clinician. So it's a lot less stress. And that's the way these new employees are looking at it, saying it's a lot less stress for me just to come in, be a damn good clinician, get my patients better, and then go home. I don't want to have to manage other people. So then when we look at things that you can do, right? Because this is where the conversation typically ends. And you might be sitting home saying, all right, I know a lot of this. We know this is what's happening. This is where the conversation will typically stop because most people are really great at pointing out the obvious, pointing out all the faults, complaining. I mean, it's kind of becoming our new national, thing here. It's just us complaining about stuff. But who's gonna be the person to just step forward and say, instead of blaming insurance or saying, I wish my association would step up, or the amazing people that we have in Congress, I wish they would step up. You got to stop relying on other people and start taking control of the situation and start taking control of the things that are in your capacity to take control of. So if you're running a business, last time I checked, you can still work on your leadership. You can still work on building out your systems and your operations, creating a dynamic company culture, sitting down and figuring out, all right, we understand that insurance is reimbursing us less every year, and that's the pattern. So instead of complaining about it, what do I have to do to actually grow this company? Because again, no growth means you're not helping anybody more. No growth means you're closing up shop. So while some people are complaining, other people are sitting down and figuring out strategies that are going to make their business thrive long term. And it's the same thing that we're dealing with regarding clinicians leaving the industry. Is that, yeah, it's an issue. And you can have certain people, I think it was, oh my gosh, I'm going to just pull it up. Recently there was a politician on X, Congressman Greg Murphy, right? And this is what he wrote. He's like, unless our medical schools do a better job of screening admission candidates, we won't have any doctors. If you don't want to practice full-time for at least 20 to 25 years, pick another profession. That's the solutions that many people are coming out with. And it's crap. He doesn't know anything about what's going on, right? That's like me saying, yeah, I'm in Vegas. Hoover Dam, which is close by, has a little bit of a leak. That's like me saying, hey, go just put some bubble gum on it. And then there's still water coming out. We need better gum, or we need some Flex Seal, as opposed to saying, why don't we actually figure out why the hell there's a leak and fix the freaking dam? But that's what we're dealing with. So what could you guys actually do? Right? It's very easy. Salary is part of it when we look at the amount of debt that people have. Now, you might say, oh, hey, Dan, I'm not overpaying somebody because they chose to go to a college that's $200,000. I'm right there with you. But that doesn't mean you can't take certain things into consideration when having conversation with your employees and help kind of create a financial roadmap. What's it going to take to help you get out of debt? And maybe it's not you, but maybe it's you saying, as the person in charge, hey, you know what? I know a great financial planner. One of the aspects that some of us do really well in medicine is this aspect of referring out. All right. So you're not helping the patient. You either refer them to a different colleague within your own, in your own organization. You refer them maybe to somebody else, different kind of specialty. Because the name of the game is, how do I just get them the outcome? Now, some of us do that. And it's the same conversation here with them is, I'm not a financial advisor, and neither are you. But that doesn't mean you can't send them somebody. Now, again, you might say, well, I don't even know anybody. Okay, so maybe that's where you start. Maybe you start creating some relationships with some people that can create some financial pathways for the employees to get out of debt. Because it's not everybody. I've talked to providers, and I've had colleagues of mine who had six-figure debt, and they got out of it, pretty quick. So there is a pathway to do it. So that's number one. Number two is, what kind of conversations are you having with employees? And what I mean by that is, you have to just be okay talking about money and talking about growth and talking about their pathways, right? And that same conversation that I had with the group of doctoral occupational therapy students, and I asked them in that same conversation, what are you guys' thoughts about money? When you hear that word, what do you think? What do you feel? And half the class makes me nervous, or I get anxiety. So if that's their mentality, and nobody's talking to them about finances, nobody's helping them. So as the person who's paying the bills, you have to be willing to have those kind of conversations. All right, what does financial success look like for you in this organization? Do you ask those questions? Right? Because then, and I'm saying that, and I know you might be listening saying, well, you never said that. I damn well did. I would always ask employees, what does financial success look like to you? If we talked about raises or bonuses, how much do you want to make? Right? Because even if somebody says, hey, I want to make more money. All right, I'm gonna give you a $10 raise. Technically, that's more money. But what employee would happy about that? Like, honestly, if any of you got a $10 raise, you're like, what are you shitting me? So we have to be comfortable. And realistically, most parents don't talk to their children about money. As somebody who's dealing in money, and if you're a clinic owner, you're dealing in money. You have to be able to have those conversations. And then you also have to be able to know and help the employee understand, what does growth look like for you? Because all what happens is I'm stuck. I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And there are clinicians out there and employees out there who, for them, Groundhog Day is great, right? Just repeat the same day. Cool, that's no problem. I like it. I'm excellent at what I do, or I love what I do. Why change it? Then you have other people, they get a little bored. They crave a little variety, so to speak, in life. So it's, all right, I've been just kind of coming in, providing great care, helping patients out. I kind of just been doing the same thing now for the last, 2 or 3 years, or maybe it's a little bit more. What else is there that I can do? So when we look at, these pathways and the conversations, that I mentioned, or the frustrations, I should say, that, some people who are running organizations have with, these young grads don't want to be in a manager or director position. They don't need to be. But what can they do differently? Doesn't mean it takes them away from their core competency. If they're great at treating patients, let them still treat patients. But if they're working 5 days a week, does that have to be 5 days a week? Can they see patients 4 days a week and then do something differently on that fifth day? Maybe, I don't know, maybe they're really good at social media. Maybe they can help your marketing team. Maybe so there are different ways. Just take some time on you to sit down and think about it. But a lot of times you'd be surprised, employees do have good ideas. So get some feedback from them, and don't wait until they're 5 years in, burned out, and they got 1 foot out the door. Have these conversations early. And that's also kind of leads into the next point about the clinical burden, right? It's more so, what's the stuff that takes me away from what I enjoy? Takes me away from treating patients. Notes. Getting on the phone. Oh my God, everybody hates this one. Getting on the phone with the insurance company and wasting 30, 45, maybe 60 minutes of your time. That's the big one for doctors. But, even me as a physical therapist, took time away from me. I had those calls. I'd be in the middle of treating a patient. Hey, insurance is calling you. Yeah, good luck saying, I'll just have them call back. Then I call one back, so let me get on the phone. So there's that aspect. And the same thing, obviously, for your nurse. More, the communication is a challenge, because a lot of systems, there's a lot of hospital systems that are completely outdated. So they waste time on inefficiencies. And the same thing, they're doing a lot of documentation. And I don't know, how many of you guys agree with this, but for me, it was way easier when we had paper. Now, obviously, I'm also dating myself. But that's one of the biggest frustrations, too, is that we have this new electronic health, record system, EHR system, and it's worse. It slows me down. So while we've been touting things as it helps create efficiencies, it's actually making people more inefficient. So are the things that you're putting in place to help them, if you've actually done that, is it actually helping them? That's a big one, right? Because it's very easy. I could easily tell you, hey, go get that AI scribe. All right. Does it work effectively? Is it safe? I'm not going to go down the cybersecurity tangent, but is it safe? And then, is it actually saving us time? Is it making it easy for the people who are seeing the patient to actually spend the time with them? Or is it glitching? Or is it actually just making it longer to do a note? So those things matter. It's not a matter of just, my team loves me because I gave them something new. It's AI. Like, that's like all of a sudden just saying AI solves everything. Does it actually work? Does it make things better? All right. And then when we look at the aspect of keeping people engaged and motivated, there has to be this, you have to remind yourself, again, why did they go to school? Don't think, I know for a fact, nobody goes to school so they can say, I'm just here so I can get to the point where I'm spending hours a day documenting. Or I'm just here so I can get on the phone with insurance. Now, you might have small percentage of people who go and say, I just want to do this because it's about the status, or it's about the money I'm going to be able to make. But that is, like I said, so small. More than 95% of people who are going into medical school are saying, I want to help, I want to serve. So are you having conversations where you remind them of that? And it doesn't mean it distracts. It's not a matter of like, hey, don't worry about all the time you're spending on documentation. It's okay because you still have a great purpose. Because that's what, some people also want to be, oh my God, what is that? Gaslighting, right? I want to gaslight the hell out of doctors and clinicians by, well, you got into this to help patients. And then they use it as a reason, as a way to kind of pull some BS on them to have them see more people. So it's not a matter of doing that. But there is an aspect you do have to remind yourself, all right, why am I actually doing this? And because again, is it as bad for some people? Yes. But there's a lot of people out there where it's not that bad. And everybody else unfortunately dealing with the same thing. But at the end of the day, I get to help patients and I get to make their lives better. So that can't be lost. Now, I'm going to say that's great. I can do all that. I can give them some take away from maybe the treating time or reduce their admin time, the time that they're on the phone. I can maybe have somebody else help with those insurance calls or something or somebody, some kind of resource that can help with documentation. But at the end of the day, I can't help them with their debt. Maybe I took your advice and I sent them over to a financial planner. But they still have to make more money. And, I'm opening a cash pay practice. How the hell am I supposed to pay this person a lot more than what they're already making? And this is where I think there's two ways to go about doing this. Now, as I say this, I want you to know, obviously, I already said, I'm not a financial planner, so I'm not giving you financial advice here. But these are things that can work. And realistically, I should say that I know they work. They just enacted very rarely. And one of the things you don't see at all in healthcare is this novel aspect of giving employees, dare I say, giving them equity in your company, right? One of the things that this shit used to frustrate the hell out of me so much, but when an owner says, and it still does, but I get it, but when an owner says, I want the employees to treat this business like it's their business. That's cool. They don't own the business. You do. So it's very easy to say that. And you say, hey, treat this like your own, but it's not my own. So how could you help them feel that it is their own? And I'm not telling you to give 50% or 20. I mean, I'll give a perfect example here. So a few years back when I was working with an organization and they were expanding and they were opening up some new offices, and myself and a few other directors had been there for, at this point, years. And it really didn't look like anybody was going anywhere. So opening an office, I know, they needed to get some capital and, dumped into it. They were buying an existing practice. Practice was old, about 30 years. Nothing had been updated. I'm talking that equipment from early 90s. So they wanted to get it built up. Perfect opportunity to also have some of those people there long term, maybe be an investor or say, hey, you know what? I want you to give you 5% of this clinic or 2%, whatever. Nothing. Right? And then one of the main people in the company actually approached me like, oh, so-and-so, came to you and talked to you about giving you equity. Right? I was like, no. I'm like, I didn't care. But that person was shocked. And this is what I'm talking about. In that instance, yes, it's a new build. But what about your current company? Are you going to be there forever too? And this aspect, the best of the best. When I talk about the best of the best, when we look at other businesses and companies around the world, as they grow, the owners own less and less, right? You don't have, what is it? Jensen Huang, the owner of NVIDIA. If I'm not mistaken, I believe he owns, NVIDIA's obviously ridiculously, one of the most valuable companies in the world. He owns 17% of the company, if I'm not mistaken. I think, Jeff Bezos, however you want to feel about the guy, he owns less than 20% of Amazon. So as the numbers get bigger, you don't need to be 100% owner because you're making more money. And that is the goal, is to actually, you talk about increasing productivity for employees. Would they be more motivated to grow your business if they actually owned a piece of your business? Obviously. But then a lot of people, if they're in that position where they can maybe get some equity, like, ooh, but this is mine. I built this. This is my money, my time. And maybe it was 15 years ago, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. They're still remembering what they did back then. So why should somebody else get a piece of that? But then you're going to go up to him and say, John, yeah, I want you to treat this like it's your business. And people think about that, then give me a piece. So getting some equity, giving some equity away to employees who deserve it. I'm talking about the front desk person you hired last week. You got to have some standards for when you do this, but that's one thing. Now, this next aspect, be brutal honest with you, I'm not the expert on it. And I've only ever heard, if I'm being honest, I've heard one other person talk about this literally in the last 10 years. And if he didn't mention it, I probably never heard this either. But I was at a Tony Robbins business mastery. So he has this, I forget, 5 or 6 day event, usually in the summertime. And it's all about business. Now, a lot of it's mindset, because that is a huge component to running a successful business, is having your psychology in the right place. But he brings in some of the best business people in the world. And the things you learn there are phenomenal. But one of the things I heard him speak, and I heard him speak about this in 2018. And he was more so discussing what happens when you've had the company now for a while, and maybe you're thinking either A, how do I reward the employees, like we're talking about here, or just what's going to happen when I don't want to be here anymore? There is that point for every owner, obviously, where they just either, I had enough. Certainly, if you're in healthcare, maybe that's coming a little bit sooner than you think, but you might say, what the hell do I do? I don't want to sell to private equity. Maybe you say that's the best financial option for me, but screw those bastards because they're not helping healthcare. Or maybe you say that is my only option. So it's either that or I close up shop and everything that I built was what? Not for nothing, but who wants to see a business just close up? Nobody. You want to see that thing keep running. So he was talking about this aspect, succession planning, so to speak. And he started talking about a ESOP, Employee Stock Ownership Plan. Now, again, I'm not the expert here, but I'm just letting you know it's available. Essentially, what you're doing is you're giving ownership of the company to the employees. And this is a little bit, it's definitely more than just giving one or two employees some equity. You're doing this on a bigger scale. And there are very big difference in structure. There's also massive advantages, financially speaking, with taxes. But what you're doing here is, again, you're now telling the employees, you guys are essentially, the owners. Most of them, if you think about it, are they going to want it to fail? No, right? They're going to say, I want this thing to work. Now I'm invested in something. And realistically, how many of us these days want to be owners? Right? We want to at least be in control of something. And I know somebody would say, I never want to be an owner. It's just too much stress, yada, yada. But perfect world. You're like, all right, if I could be an owner, grow a company, do really well financially, have a life, I would love to do that. For a lot of people, though, it's not easy and they don't want to do the work. And I don't blame, like I said, it ain't easy. Being an entrepreneur, being an owner, it's not for the faint of heart. You're now giving them an ability to essentially be an entrepreneur, be an owner, but it's predicated on their results. So when you're looking at it saying, all right, I'm rewarding them, yes. And I'm now also motivating them. I'm giving myself as the owner an exit strategy. And then when we talk about, legacy in business of what happens when I'm gone, for the most part, you're ensuring that the legacy of your business is lasting for the long haul. So when we look at, those are some high-level things you guys can do. And I really hope you take at least one of them, figure out how could I apply this to my own business. Again, when we look at the cost of not keeping people, 6 to 9 months salary for a nurse or a physical therapist or an occupational therapist, up to 213% for your top-level clinicians, your MDs. How much is that costing you? I lost plenty of clinicians when I was younger and I didn't know what to do from a standpoint of leading people, and I had multiple physical therapists quit. I did the math. I'm like, damn, dude, I'm costing this company that I really loved being there. I was costing them over $100,000 every single year in lost revenue. So for you, if you're looking at your business saying, hey, thank God we're doing well. Yeah, we do lose some employees or clinicians, but, we find a replacement. I want you to start doing the math. All right, how much is it if I'm losing $50,000 or $60,000 per PT, physical therapist, or per nurse, or $40,000 per nurse, or I'm losing, maybe $600,000 or $800,000 if a doctor leaves. Holy shit! how much money are we giving away simply because we're not actually, understanding and aligning with them. We don't know exactly what they want their path to look like, and we're just kind of leaving it up to chance. So, what I want you guys to also do is, understand that if you're not sure, if you don't know maybe how to have these conversations, or you don't even know what maybe your retention rate is. Maybe it's you have a larger organization, good for you. Obviously, if you got a clinic of maybe 10 or 12 people, you should obviously be pretty easy, not just to keep people, but understand, all right, what's our retention rate? But if you have a big organization, like I don't even know how many people are leaving or what's our, rate of retention here. If you're not sure even how to figure that out, this is what I say, honestly, just really, advocate for you guys to book a call. This is what I'm obviously doing this today. Antonio's away. But this is what we're, really good at, is being able to dissect all the stuff that you can't see, because the reality of running a business is that a lot of times you're in the business and you can't see everything. And it's not because you're an idiot or because you're blind. It's just because you got too much shit going on. Because again, you're on the phone with insurance. You're treating a patient. You're putting out the fires. You can't see everything. And that doesn't make you a weak or ineffective leader. Just that's normal. Makes you a normal business leader. So book a call. Let's dissect this together. Let's take away one of the biggest challenges we're having, and let's just be able to, have a business, have an organization that can really do what you actually opened it for, which is to help patients get better. Guys, really appreciate the time. Leave some comments. See you next time.